So I am this far, which looks like I'm almost halfway, but I actually am over halfway. The last good chunk is the appendices. Are the appendices? So I'm in book 6. I just got past the Tower of Cirith Ungol. It's actually been a few days since I have actually read from Return of the King, but it's just been a very busy couple of days, and that day I was planning on talking to the camera the other day, but I came home from work and a bunch of my family were over at my house, including the kids, but that day was such a day for reading, because in the morning I had the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, the chapter. That chapter alone has, I swear, every single page something that makes me emotional, and I know that is basically the only thing that I've been talking about, because that's kind of what surprises me every time. It's one of the things that surprises me every time that I read through this book, is that different things make me emotional every time. The Battle of the Pelennor Fields is guaranteed to make me cry, basically every page, and I want to intercut for you right here of all the things, because it's just everything, and it's ridiculous. So that morning I sat right here, basically where I'm sitting now, and got through the entire Battle of the Pelennor Fields, and of course the end of book 5. So that included the Houses of Healing. That chapter is the one that from which I got a quote that inspired part of this tattoo that's very difficult to, inspired the crown from this bluebonnet tattoo, and maybe I will explain at a later date. But I love that chapter too. Can't wait for the Steward and the King. If you know, you know. And so now I am, like I said, in book 6, past the Tower of Cirith Ungol. I will most likely get through a good chunk today. I may not finish today, but that's the goal. The other fun thing about reading the other day was I'd started with the Battle of the Pelennor Fields in the morning, which is already like this landmark thing to read for me, and then later in that day I was reading Wuthering Heights, and I got to that part where Heathcliff shouts to Kathy, basically, so this, which is iconic, unhinged behavior. But I've since finished Wuthering Heights. Believe it or not, I do read other things besides Lord of the Rings and Tolkien related things. I decided to go on a walk today because it's beautiful and it hasn't been in a long time. It actually kind of feels like fall, or it's fall in Texas because it's a high of 70, I think, today. And it is the middle of October, but I will take it. The trees definitely have not changed. I think I was walking out there for maybe 45 minutes and I saw all of 4 leaves fall. So our autumn is a little bit different than other places, but like I said, I will take it. I will take anything where I can walk outside with a jacket and still feel great. What a good time. I don't think I've ever taken a walk out here and not seen any animals, but that almost happened this time. I tried to spot like as many wildflowers as I could, so like a few of these. They were very nice, but tend to be very small this time of year. But then usually, so I almost always see multiple dogs, multiple sheep, goats, longhorn, horses, all of the things. I feel like I'm still missing some. Can I say goats? I don't know. But this time, I almost didn't see any animals until, for one, this weird thing, which was interesting, little living furry boa. And then at the very end, I did see a few donkeys and cattle. Oh, donkeys. I think that was the one that I was missing. But anyway, so the reason that I wanted to record a bit was because actually the other day, I just forgot to say it, I realized that I wanted to talk about just a part of the way that these books make me feel. Or book, I guess, if you just want to call it The Lord of the Rings, this one. Anyway, when I try to get a mental image of how these books make me feel, I almost feel like a plant. And bear with me. I feel like a plant that has been in the shade for a long, long time and finally has a chance to sit out in the full sun and just feel it all. That's how I feel when I read these books. And then reading in the past couple of days, I noticed that a couple of different times, that is almost the very picture, not like a plant so much, but the feeling of just being in the full sun. That is a picture that's used a few different times, especially near the end when Sauron's defeated and there are passages from different POVs of people experiencing that. There are a couple of different times where people just sense that the sun is shining brighter on them and they have this feeling of joy that they can't describe where it's coming from or why. Another quote that I really, really love and is a great summary of, I think, the effect that this book has on people. It's like a semi-popular quote, so you might have heard it before, but it is in the chapter, The Field of Cormorant, and it says, "Their hearts, wounded with sweet words, overflowed, and their joy was like swords, and they passed in thought out to regions where pain and delight flow together, and tears are the very wine of blessedness." Just like, who else writes like that? I cannot with this man. The way that he writes speaks so clearly to me and so vividly of every good and healing thing that I need reminding of. Maui wanted to say hi. Oh, goodbye. Anyway, I'm just about finished with the book, so I will get back to you when it is all done and have probably a kind of long wrap up about how this time around went. Look at these dogs. Alright, I am officially done reading Lord of the Rings for the 5th time. Does my voice sound raspy. I feel like it's raspy. I'm allergic to like everything in the air anyway, so I would not be surprised if it's taken me down. I did not try to live vlog myself at all while I was reading the end, for the same reason that I don't read the end in public, or several parts actually. When I went on the camping trip that I showed at the beginning of this video, I got a couple of chapters into Return of the King, and then I realized that I was getting way too close to the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, and I was like, nope, not gonna read this with other people sitting at campsites like 30 feet away from us. And so the end of Lord of the Rings is the time that I absolutely for sure know that nobody needs to see me, because I'm just weeping and weeping profusely basically the whole time. And it seems to grow with every time that I read this book, the amount that I am crying, which is fun. I think that one of the magical things about reading Tolkien is that when you read his works for the first time, especially something like Lord of the Rings, and he even said this himself at some point, that you read it and you get the sense that you're in a much bigger world than what you see just on the pages, that there are references to stories and people and things that happened millennia prior to the actual Lord of the Rings. And so there's this magic in when you read, you can tell you're part of something so huge. And the magical thing about reading his works is that that doesn't really go away when you continue to read multiple times over like I have. I am able to understand all of those references much better having read all of these things up here. And like I find myself only growing in appreciation every time that I read the books. Something interesting that I've found every time that I read through, my mind tends to latch onto a main theme more than the others. And I think I mentioned this in a previous video that maybe like the first time through, I don't remember if I had mentioned this. The first time through, I remember focusing a lot on Aragorn, probably just because of how his arc differed from the movies so starkly. I was able to follow through all the differences between his book self and his movie self. The second time I read through, I really latched on to Frodo, to his grief, his burden, and the trauma that he goes through, because that is what you could call it. And so each time has been something different, a different character, a different piece of the story, a different area. This time, I mean, obviously, I paid attention to a few different things, but there wasn't like an overarching thing like usual, except for maybe the prose, as in the actual words that Tolkien is using. I, over the past couple of years, have just tried to become more aware of language, of how it's being used, and there's so much more in depth that I could go with Tolkien, like for myself, looking closely, trying to identify what draws me to his works. But this time, I think I was really just trying to enjoy the way that he interweaves words and creates a real tapestry of words. And it's majestic, it's rich, it's beautiful, and that's why I think it's just such a thing that I cannot put words to right now. That's what it is. I will say, though I had just said I didn't really latch on to anything in particular for the first time, I think that the reason when I finished the book that I am so emotional, like long after I closed the book itself, is because of Frodo and his journey and the grief that he carries and the opportunity that he has for healing and restoration at the end. That passage, there's like half a paragraph on the second to last page when it talks about he goes over into the high sea and the gray rain curtain rolls back and he sees the far green country into the swift sunrise, and his dream from Tom Bombadil's house from way back in book 1 is finally coming to fruition. Having that happen after all of the terrible grief that he has gone through, because only a couple chapters prior he thought that he was dead. He would have been absolutely fine with just laying down and dying on the side of the mountain, and yet he continues to live on and carry his long burden that quote, and I might put it in here, that quote about him being wounded by so many things and not knowing where he's gonna find rest, and Gandalf can't even answer him, like, violence. It does violence to my mind and to my heart. So, I imagine, and kind of hope, because there are many spoilers, that most of the people watching this have read Lord of the Rings before, / at least seen the movies, so that you're not just like getting all of these very random, unconnected things spoiled for you. But something that I wanted to throw out, assuming that you have read the books, I mean, feel free to add in if you've just seen the movies, but I feel like it comes across more strongly when you read the books, because that's a lot more of a time commitment. There are a lot more words and ideas being thrown at you. The question is this: what things did you start to see differently or even notice for the first time after you read these books? Because for me, it's so much of the world around me. I think it's the magic of all good fairy stories. Like, he explains this in, where do I have it? Tree and Leaf, his essay on fairy stories. My favorite commentary of all time on what books should be is in that essay on fairy stories. There is a section called on recovery, consolation, and escape. I think it's in that order. Recovery, consolation, and escape. And the three things that he talks about in that section, you'll never guess what they were based on the title, are life-changing to me. Because I just asked y'all that question, what do you start to see differently after reading these books? And if something popped into your mind, that's a great example of this idea of recovery that he talks about. And I just want to like briefly talk about that. All three of the recovery, consolation, and escape, those are probably my favorite things about these books. Maybe I'll talk about them in more depth a different time, but right now I just want to talk about recovery and this magical thing that happens when not only when we're transported to other worlds, but especially in works like this, when you are transported to another setting that helps you see your own world more clearly and with more perception of its value. It's such an incredible thing. G.K. Chesterton had this quote that goes something along the lines of, "Fairy stories give us rivers that run with wine, if only to remind us for one wild moment that they actually run with water." Which is so good. And that's exactly what Lord of the Rings does for me, is it reminds me of the value and the beauty and the singular creativity of our world, the unrepeatable creativity of all the things in it. Like the earth under my feet, the trees that I'm staring at right now, the meals that I share with my friends and family, the places that I travel to and how I get there, and just every piece of the natural world around me, I start to see more clearly after reading stuff like this. So, if you're watching these and maybe have not read the books ever, just movies, or even if you've read the books but it's just been a long, long time, hey, I hope that this has kind of encouraged you to maybe reread them. That would be fun. And if you're gonna reread them, maybe like next year or something, let me know and we can do a little bit of a book club or something, because we know I'm gonna read next year again, and the year after that, and the year after that. So if we could line it up and make a little bit of a club for ourselves, cool, great, let's do it. So that's really it, unless something comes to me like an hour from now that I forgot I wanted to talk about. Actually, no, last thing, you know what I am so surprised by, a little proud of myself for, but also like, was it a disservice to you and to me? I don't know, maybe. I don't think that I mentioned Faramir at all. Because I basically skipped, I didn't vlog very much at the end of Two Towers, where we get most of him, and then I only like very briefly talked about Return of the King, things that surrounded him. He's my favorite character besides Frodo. I love Faramir, and I cannot believe that I didn't talk about him at all. Maybe next year. Next year. He's just like the ideal. He's the ideal. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching all of the things. I know that this has been many, many minutes worth of content. So thank you. Remember to let me know if you are going to be reading Lord of the Rings like a year from now so that I can join you. Just like pop back into the comment section in a year. Or feel free to subscribe, feel free to comment anything, especially if you have thoughts about this channel in general. I've only really started to make videos of this kind. Would you be interested in me making more videos about things that I'm reading? Obviously, I own a lot of books, and I try to read often. So if you are interested in seeing more videos, if they're more vlogs, if they're more, you know, TBRs or currently reading, month-long wrap-up, things like that, let me know. I'm open to suggestions. I'm open to making this channel grow a little bit more. I don't know, so you tell me. Regardless, that's all I have to say. You're free to go. You're free to go now.